Redshift here, doing my part to shift perceptions out of the pink and into the red. Okay, I think it needs to be said that the men at the top who have the best genes, highest IQs, best money, best looks, most charisma, most cunning, most money, etc. These guys, they don't breed much, right? And I wanted to point out that that is a bad thing. This speaks badly of them, and it also speaks to the corrupting nature of power. Although those who rise to the top in terms of power are often corrupt anyway, which is how they rise to the top, so it should be no surprise that they have few kids because of being corrupt. It should be no surprise that they're corrupt, and it also should be, in a sense, no surprise that they have few kids because they're hedonists. But on the other hand, it really, in a sense, is surprising to me. Because as people, they what they've done is they've castrated themselves voluntarily in order to gain power or maintain power, which is very strange to me because the very like there's nothing weaker or more pathetic or whatever. Not to like insult anybody who may happen to be impotent or whatever, but like there's nothing more pathetic or bad than impotence, right? And so it really is very strange to me that they would sacrifice their own virility, their own evolutionary relevance, merely to control everybody else. It's like, number one, there's probably better ways of controlling other people. Number two, yeah, okay, it also shows their stupidity that they even think that it's better to control everybody rather than let everybody have freedom. Because, when everybody has freedom, then many, many good things happen. When people are, tyrannically enslaved, there's all kinds of poverty and inefficiency and waste and psychopathicness and stuff that goes along with a enslaved society, right? So it's like the elites are just, they're choosing to have few children. And it's like, yeah, okay, I know they work long hours, some of them, maybe not the elite elites, but like, a lot of people in the upper middle class or upper middle class or whatever, they have really high IQs and they work their asses off. Yeah, Lloyd Blankfein's a billionaire now, but to get to be a billionaire, he worked his ass off. Hey, these people, they may be evil and ruthless and just corrupt in every way almost, but like a lot of them, yeah, they do work their asses off, right? That's no redeeming factor. That's not any kind of thing that should should incentivize us to show them mercy rather than chopping their heads off or torturing them to death, burning them at the stake. Yeah, you work hard. So fucking what? You're still a sexual degenerate. You're still, a ruthless bastard. You still destroyed the economy of the world, etc., etc. We should show them no mercy because of their long work hours, their good work ethic or whatever, but because it's purely driven by selfishness anyway also. But also, like, okay, so they have a strong work ethic. They still fuck like crazy. That doesn't stop them from having a ton of sex, and so there really is no fucking excuse for them to not be breeding like crazy. And like evolutionarily speaking, what is more simpish? Well, maybe not simpish per se. Well, simpish in a sense, yeah. It's like cuckish, right? Like cuckishness is simpishness. It's like they are literally evolutionarily speaking cucking themselves by choosing to not have kids. It's fucking crazy. These guys will fuck tons of prostitutes. They'll fuck tons of sluts. They'll have, a wife or a few wives and a bunch of mistresses even while they're married, or have a bunch of threesomes or whatever. These guys are super sexually degenerate. They fuck like crazy. But yet they basically have no kids. They basically don't even pass on their genes at all, barely. Maybe they have one or two kids with one wife, and that's it. Like all the fucking they do, all the sexual partners that they have, and yet they have almost no kids. And this is what I meant in the beginning when I said that, like, they've castrated themselves, they've cucked themselves just to control the people. They've made all these misandric laws and instituted child support and stuff like this just so that they can control the common people. But they've allowed that. I mean, what's the cost of, child support? It means that when they fuck like crazy, they can't have kids. They have to prevent themselves from having kids, even though they're fucking like crazy. That's crazy. Like, the whole point of having a lot of sex is, well, yeah, I guess hedonism, but it's also, like, evolutionarily speaking, it's to have kids, right? And if you are able to fuck the most, that's evolution saying this is the guy who has the best genes, who should be passing on his genes the most. So I'm gonna let this guy fuck the most so that he can pass on his genes the most. But they're cheating nature. They're cheating eugenics. They're cheating, the species and evolution and nature's way of improving humanity so that humanity can survive, presumably. Like they're cheating nature. And what do you think is going to be the effect of that? Everybody's IQ stay way lower than they should be. Like, think of it. Like, we are coming to a point where, like, we're going to have a mass die-off of humanity, or either mass starvation or mass internecine conflict that, kills humanity, or we're going to have, the elites create a virus that kills everybody without certain genes that are indicators of a high IQ, so that everybody who's low IQ dies, and everybody or almost everybody with a high IQ lives. Right? Like, we're going to have some horrific event like that because we created welfare. Right? Like, if we had not created welfare, then these top guys would have been fucking like crazy, but more women would have been keeping their legs closed too. So society's morality would have been much better, but these guys still would have been able to fuck like crazy, and they would have been having a hell of a lot more kids by doing so than they are having now. Instead of having 1 or 2 kids, maybe they'd have 1 or 2 legitimate kids, but they'd have 5 or 10 kids, maybe even 15 or 20 kids out there who are illegitimate. Right? And so those kids don't get rich because they're illegitimate. They can't inherit or whatever. But then those kids, they grow up to have those same great genes, or a lot of much better genes, and then maybe they just marry a beautiful middle-class woman, and maybe her genes aren't great, and maybe he only has a 130 IQ because his father had a 160 IQ, and then maybe his kids only have 115 IQs. But that process, those top guys filtering their genes down to the middle class and whatnot, would just keep happening over and over and over and over. Throughout all their kids, maybe those 15 or 20 kids or 10 kids that he has illegitimate, they all have, maybe because they got those same kind of genes, maybe they cheat on their wife or whatever, and that's not good, but they're going to impregnate a bunch of women as well. Maybe mainly the sluts, probably, right? Because society would be more moral if there were no child support, because more women would be keeping, all women would be keeping their legs closed except for the sluts. So these guys would just be impregnating the sluts. Right, so then the women who have bad genes anyway would be having their kids be much smarter and stuff, right? So it wouldn't even necessarily be ruining the morality of society, but yet these genes would be spreading more and more and more in society, or at least there would be a certain strain within the middle class that is still strong, still defiant, still intelligent, etc., etc. You know what I mean? A much bigger strain. And a strain that's much more savvy and ruthless as well, that is also more able to deal with the elites when they're being psychotic, so that the common people can overthrow the elites more easily. Because a lot of those elite genes are in the populace, or at least in a certain segment of the populace, so that those people, and not everybody can be a billionaire, so maybe those guys are just upper middle class, and they want to overthrow the government when it's totally psychotic like it is today, right? So then these guys could lead a rebellion, you know what I mean? Because they have a lot of the genes, the ruthlessness, the callousness, the intelligence, etc., needed to overthrow the elites, right? So the elites have been totally cucking themselves by not procreating. I mean, is there anything more pathetic than having the genes good enough to fuck hundreds of women, because that many women want you, and or you make good enough money to attract that many women, but yet you've only had 1 or 2 kids? Is there anything more pathetic in all of life, at least for a man, than that? I don't think so, because the whole procreation thing is very similar to the whole IQ and revolution thing. Like I've said before, I don't know if those videos have been released yet or not, but or if I've even turned them into videos and they're still just voice recorder notes, but whatever. I've said before, I think more than once, that with great power comes great responsibility. To whom much is given, much is expected, right? So the top guys, whether in the middle class because they have top genes, or the guys in the top because maybe they don't even have top genes, they only have 120 IQs or something, but they're billionaires, like whoever it is, like whether you're, a top guy because you're super rich, or you're a top guy because you have an incredible IQ and an incredible memory, good looks, charm, etc. Like top guys, however they are, top guys, these guys have, especially the guys with the highest IQs and the best memories and stuff, these guys even if they don't make incredible money, like, 10 million or 20 million bucks a year or something through like very safe investments, and they have 500 million bucks or, a billion bucks, and they're just investing very, very safely and making 10 or 20 million, a year through, taking almost no risk or whatever, right? Gold appreciation or just, a mutual fund or whatever. Whatever, like, they bear the guys with the highest IQs and best memories and stuff. These guys bear the greatest responsibility for making the world a sane place again, reinstituting freedom again, et cetera, et cetera. These guys bear the most, these guys have the heaviest burden on their shoulders to make that happen. You can't blame the common folk who have terrible IQs and or terrible memories for not revolting, because they don't have the power to revolt, because most power now is IQ and memory. IQ and memory are now what, physical strength used to be and what courage used to be, right? And the guys with the real courage these days is not the courage against death, it's the courage to fight hedonism, fight your own hedonism, like Zeitgeist Eater is able to do, and sacrifice time, effort, and money in creating subversive things that can preserve free speech and stuff like this, or preserve the free ability for the free market to work, like Silk Road, so that you can then have a society full of, peace and prosperity and overcome government tyranny, right? But where was I going with that? Oh yeah, like the responsibility that intelligent people have to code, subversive code like Zeitgeist Eater is doing is much, 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 much greater. Like if you have a 150 or 140 or 160 IQ, the responsibility on your shoulders to do subversive coding like Zeitgeist Eater is doing is huge, absolutely huge. Much, much greater than the responsibility of like a 115 IQ guy with a good memory or decent memory who can maybe learn to code, but not very well or not very easily, right? Like, especially since these guys who make that much money often have more free time, because they have better money, make more money. The more money you make, the more free time you have. And the more free time you have, the more responsible you are for society. The more you have a responsibility to use that free time to do subversive things that are going to bring down the government, or at least make it more sane again. Smaller, more peaceful, less, tyrannical, etc. Right? Like, you have that bigger responsibility. Same thing with, like, fucking and genes, right? Like the better your genes and or the higher your SMV, the more of a responsibility you have to breed. And the more shameful it is, therefore, if you only have one or two kids or no kids. Like these guys who fuck, hundreds of women, they should be having dozens of kids, if not scores of kids. Because that's their responsibility, is to pass on their good genes. Like I was trying to say earlier, but I kind of got off track. Not really. I'm sort of, tangent, then back to the original tangent, then back to the original thing. What I wanted to say is, like, think of how, if we had never instituted, child support, if those guys would be having way, way, way more kids, right? And if they'd been having way more kids ever since the invention of the birth control pill, which they would have, women do actually want to breed. So even with birth control, they'll often either intentionally or subconsciously intentionally, but not consciously intentionally, sabotage their birth control. They'll miss a day or whatever, and then so, with the pill or whatever, or they'll let their IUD expire without thinking about it or whatever, right? They'll get pregnant because that's what they really deep down, that's what their genes are still always trying to get them to do, is to breed. You know what I mean? So even birth control would not stop these guys from breeding like crazy. Maybe it would slow it down, but these top guys having this much sex, they'd be breeding like crazy also. If, there were no child support. But it's not like you can blame the government for that, really, because these guys, there's so many of them, top guys, at least in terms of genes. They're not all rich, but, they're all at least upper middle class, or almost all of them. And these guys could easily unite. Like, let's say they're only the top, 2% of guys, because, like, Mensa is the top 2% of the population in terms of IQ. So let's just call it 1%, because not all the Mensa guys necessarily have great memories. Not all the Mensa guys necessarily have, charm. Maybe a lot of them have, some kind of mental ailment like autism or something that, makes them high IQ but totally unsociable or whatever. So let's just call it the top 1% or the top 0.5%. of guys in society have this good of IQs to where they can, fuck like crazy and all the rest of it. But it's not even that. It's like, I shouldn't even say that, because you really don't need a 160 or 140 IQ or something. Even just having like a 120 IQ and having charm and good looks and stuff can allow, and making good money can allow you to fuck like crazy, right? Fuck tons of women. So really, it's probably way bigger than just 0.5%. Let's call it, I don't know. Let's call it 5% of the population can like fuck like crazy. Right? It's not the entire top 20%, because remember, women think the guy at the 20% cutoff line, that's the average guy according to women's view. Right? But women don't want the average guy. They want the above average guy. So it's probably just the top 10 or top 5% of guys, or maybe even only top 2 or 3% of guys who can fuck like crazy, right? Fuck tons of women, right? Let's call it the top 5%, because I think that's a nice middle ground, right? That's probably fairly accurate. The top 5% of guys, what is that? In a country of 320 some million, 320, it's like 325 or 326 or 7 or something, but let's call it 320 for easy math. That's 160 million guys in the country. 10% of 160 million is 16 million, so 5% is 8 million. 8 million guys in the country can fuck like crazy. Okay, but, some of them are under the age of, 14 or 15 or 16 or whenever they start having sex. So those guys can't fuck because they're too young. And then you got all the old guys who could fuck like crazy, but now they're too old. They're in their 60s or something, right? So let's just cut it down and say there's like, I don't know, maybe like 5 million, 4 or 5 million guys in the country who can fuck like crazy. You don't think that's enough to overthrow the government? I do. But we weren't even talking about overthrowing the government, right? We were talking about like breeding like crazy. 4 or 5 million guys fucking like crazy who could be breeding like crazy, right? Like think about it, like 4 to 5 million guys, if they each had like 10 kids over their lifetime, even if most of them were illegitimate, because let's say we never created the child support laws, so there's no danger for these guys to get a bunch of women pregnant out of wedlock. And their wife's not going to leave them because they make good money, and she's got kids with him. So as long as as long as he's in no danger of leaving her, she doesn't give a shit if he cheats on her. You know what I mean? As long as he doesn't bring any STDs back to her either. Or maybe she just doesn't want to have sex with him anymore because they've been married for 5 or 10 years or whatever, and she's sick of having sex with him. She's bored, right? But she doesn't want to leave him either. She just wants to be a wife and raise kids, right? And so she doesn't mind if he goes out there and cheats, even if he does get an STD, because she's never going to sleep with him again, right? So he's out there fucking like crazy, and he has like 10 illegitimate kids and like 1 or 2 legitimate kids, maybe 3 legitimate kids, right? Think about that. 10 kids from 4 million guys. That's 40 million kids, right? And think about that generation over generation, like, over a 40 or 60 year period or whatever. Let's say over a 60 to 80 year period, that's going to double again, because that's one guy, 4 million, one period of 4 million, one group of 4 million guys going through their whole lifespan and then being replaced by another 4 million, right? So obviously it happens gradually. So it's, a million here, a million here, a million here, etc. But like, just do it in easy chunks like that for easy math. And so like, over, let's say, an 80-year period, you have more like 8 million men doing this. So that's 80 million kids. 80 million. Like in a country this big, that is a huge percentage, right? Because like the average middle-class guy only has, like 2 to 3 kids, right? And so if we had, no child support laws, if you didn't have to pay child support for illegitimate kids or anything, this would mean that the guys at the top would have passed on their genes to where their kids would probably be a huge percentage of the next generation's population. Probably at least, I don't know, 20 to 30% maybe. And then this would make it so that, and then those guys would marry average girls, and even if they didn't cheat, it would just up the average IQ of the whole population, especially since it'd be a generational process. You know what I mean? And our average IQ today, if those guys had been doing that, could be 105, 110, maybe even 115, and then maybe everybody or almost everybody, but it wouldn't even have to be everybody. It could be just even getting a much bigger percentage of the population having an IQ above 115 so that they can learn to code. or above 110, whatever the cutoff is for learning to code. I think you got to have like either a 110 or higher or 115 or higher IQ to learn to code. That alone, even just having, an extra 10 or 20% of the population that has an IQ high enough to learn to code, that alone would make it so there could be way more people, who could do subversive coding, and get the government under control, keep the government tyranny from advancing, so that even to just maintain its current power level, not current now, but like its current, let's say 10 or 20 years ago, even to just maintain that power level, the government would have to be fighting like crazy to not lose power to the people who are coding, things, subversive things like Bitcoin into existence, or Steam, or whatever, or the MGTOW Mirror Project, or Silk Road. People are just coding away like crazy all the time, just anonymous, regular people. And there's just too many of them, so they're rolling back tyranny. They're increasing freedom by doing that. Or even if freedom doesn't increase, at the very least, tyranny would be slowed or stopped in its advancement, because the government would have to fight that stuff. Rather than advance the tyranny more and more, it would have to be fighting just to keep a handhold, keep its fingers, it would be hanging on by its fingernails and just trying to keep the power that it already has, That would be the case. So these guys, by not passing on their genes a ton, have done a massive disservice to the world. They have, allowed the IQs to stay low. They have thereby made it so that we can't fight the government by means of coding. They have made it so that people are stupid and fall for liberal propaganda, although maybe I shouldn't say that, because a lot of very smart people are liberal. Idiots, but they have very high IQs, etc. So it's really, in the same way that, the people at the top, whether in terms of money or IQ, even if they don't have a lot of money, if they just have high IQs, very high IQs and very good memories, they bear the lion's share of the blame for not overthrowing the government, for not bringing back freedom, etc. Similarly, the dysgenic place we find ourselves in now, the place that we're finding ourselves in now, where average IQ is insufficient to meet the demands of the job market and the what would you call it? The the warfare market, let's call it. The need for warriors who can fight the government where it needs to be fought. That is in the digital space, right? Like the lack of people like Zeitgeist Eater, the lack of more people like Zeitgeist Eater, and the lack of people with IQs high enough to get the jobs that exist now and will exist even more so in the future. That is, jobs where you need a high IQ and a good memory for it. Let's say a 120 IQ or 115 IQ or higher for it. The lack of these people in society, these people not existing, the lion's share of that blame falls on these top guys too. So these guys, it's not just that they're cucking themselves by not having kids. And if we lived in a masculine society, which these 4 million guys with their wealth and influence and power could create, fuck that. Like these guys, a lot of them make, a few $100,000 a year. Imagine if they were using that few $100,000 a year to, hire coders, right? Like if you make like $400,000 or $500,000 a year, you could probably easily donate, $30,000 a year to some young 13, 14, 15-year-old coder who would, who would much rather get paid for his subversive coding than not get paid, and he's not quite old enough to have gotten, a really, a bachelor's or a master's or a PhD to where he can get a really good paying job. So, he's really smart, but he can't really do much with it yet. So, and he's doing a lot of coding anyway, because that's what he's good at, and he likes to be rebellious because he's young. So he's doing subversive coding, right? So it would be good to direct these young kids as, subversive coding into coding something specific, like Tor, advancing Tor or the MGTOW Mirror or Tails or something like that. And then pay the kids. If they're doing subversive coding anyway, make them do some good subversive coding instead of hacking. It could end them up in prison or end them up, getting basically put on parole. Like I read about this one guy who's a hacker or whatever. He got, put on parole or whatever. Didn't have to do any jail time, but he had to code for the government or work for the government in some way related to coding or hacking or, for the NSA or whatever. He had to help the government enslave the people for years And then, the tendency to hack and stuff was just too great. He went back to it, and then he got caught again, and then they sent him to prison. But the first time, they let him work for the government after that. They basically didn't let him do any jail time, little or no jail time. And then they offered him this, parole thing or whatever. And then they're like, as long as you don't hack again and you work for us, we're not going to send you to prison. So that's what happens to hackers. You know what I mean? They get caught up by the system, and then the government, uses them to fight us, the people. So, our fighters get turned into the service of the enemy. They get forcibly recruited into the enemy's ranks, the government's ranks, and then we get enslaved even further. So, how did I get on that train of thought, though? But, yeah, oh yeah. So yeah, these guys who make 3, 4, 5, 600,000 bucks a year, these sort of upper middle class guys who make a lot of money and have really high IQs and good memories and stuff. These guys who fuck like crazy also because of the money they make and their intelligence and stuff. These guys, they could easily be funding one of these guys each. Each one of these guys could fund one subversive coder because he's working at his job. He's got a PhD and he's working 70 to 100 hours a week. So he doesn't have the time to do subversive coding, even if he does know how to code or could learn how to code, right? That's still no excuse for not coding, though. He could pay 30,000 bucks to some 13 or 14 or 15-year-old kid to do subversive coding. 3 hours a day, 7 days a week, or 6 days a week or something, right? And then you may not think that would be much, but imagine if, just 30% of guys like that, who make 300,000 to 600,000 bucks a year, imagine if just 30% of them were, funding young subversive coders like that and directing them and telling them where to work, saying, I will pay you 30,000 bucks a year just to do coding like you're doing anyway, but you have to work on the MGTOW mirror, or you have to work on Tor, or you have to work on Tails. If you work on Tails, 3 hours a day, and I have a contact in Tails who tells me whether you're sending in the required amount of code every week or month or whatever. And if you send in the required amount of code or every month to make sure that you're not wasting my money, that you're not just raking in my money and not coding enough, if you code that stuff enough like you're supposed to, then you get paid and you can make it so that he's getting paid good money. I mean, 30,000 bucks isn't that much, but considering the guy would basically just be doing this part-time, that's pretty good money. Getting paid, 30,000 bucks when you're 13 or 14 or 15 just to work part-time, 3 hours a day. That's pretty good. You know what I mean? I think a lot of 13, 14, 15-year-old high IQ, coding types would love to get that deal. You know what I mean? And then maybe when they get older, maybe he offers them more money. Or maybe he just is like, okay, you've been doing this for 3 years for me, now you're going to college, you need to spend more time in school, and, I can't afford to pay you more, so I'm just going to hire another 13 or 14 or 15-year-old coder to do what you were doing, so, we're going to part ways, thanks for working for me, doing all this coding for me, for these years, and, good luck with your life, right? I hope you keep up with the subversive coding, or make a bunch of money and then do what I did, and fund another young subversive coder like I did, when you get to be rich. Right? And then you just keep doing that. You just keep funding these young coders over and over and over like that, for a few years, for 1 or 2 or 3 years, until you part ways. And imagine, how many high IQ guys are there in the country? There's a lot, right? Millions. And so even if just, a million of them were doing this, hiring other people to be subversive coders, young subversive coders to code subversively for, Tor or Tails or the MGTOW mirror or something like that. Imagine how much subversive code could be written. Imagine how much more advanced Tails and Tor and things like this would be. Imagine. Just, Tor would probably be so advanced that the NSA would no longer be able to crack it, would no longer be able to surveil it. And then, synergistic benefit, they would be able to create a Silk Road that would no longer be able to be taken down. You see, you can't take something down like that. You can't take something like that down if you can't, crack it or surveil it or anything. You know what I mean? Who are you going to arrest? Right? And then Tails would be way, way, way more powerful because it uses Tor. So it would be way more powerful if Tor were utterly invincible because of all the subversive coding being done by young people, because they're being funded to do that by, people who have millions of dollars, or at least make hundreds of thousands of bucks every year, and can therefore easily, part with 30,000 bucks a year. If you make 300,000 bucks a year, donating 30,000 bucks a year is way easier. That's 10% of your income. That's way easier to do than it is if you make, 50,000 a year to donate 5,000 a year. It's still 10%, but the guy with 300,000 making 300,000 bucks a year is a way bigger buffer, way bigger buffer because, food costs the same for him. You know what I mean? And yeah, sure, his rent is higher and stuff, but, he's probably bought a house already. So, he doesn't have to pay rent either. Oh, you got to pay property tax. Big fucking deal. When you're making that much money, it's hardly anything. You know what I mean? So, like, guys like this that make hundreds of thousands, called 300,000 to 600,000 bucks a year, it doesn't hurt them. Like, a lot of guys in the middle class who make 40 to 60,000 bucks a year, a lot of them are Christians, and so they donate 10% of their earnings every year to their church. You can't fucking tell me that these $300,000 to $600,000 a year earning guys can't donate 10% of their income to a subversive coder to get a bunch of subversive code written every year. You can't fucking tell me they can't do that shit. Because it's easier for them to donate 10% of their income than it is for a middle class guy with barely any money, 40 to 60,000 bucks a year he makes, for him to donate 10%. The middle class guys, the Christians, they donate 10% of their income every year. So it is the easiest thing in the world for a guy who makes 300,000 to 600,000 bucks a year to donate 10% of his income every year. And so, donate to what you like, but I'm saying, like, you should be donating to a young subversive coder. Now, yeah, maybe it's not so easy to find a young subversive coder, but all you got to do is find one, like Zeitgeist Eater or something, or use some kind of method, like, maybe travel around to schools and say, who are your highest IQ kids in the school? I'd like to talk to them about a business proposition. And then they, like, pull them out of school or whatever, or give those names to you, and then you talk to all the kids, and you're like, hey, do any of you code? And then the ones that say, yeah, you're like, how would you like to do some, coding on Tor or Tails or the Mirror, and I'll pay you to do that. Just like 3 hours a day coding, and 5-6 days a week, and I'll pay you 30 or 40,000 bucks a year. And then the kids that said yes, boom. Now you got your one person who does that for you for a year or 2 or 3 or whatever. And then you just do that again. You get another name. 3 years later when this guy's done doing that for you, this kid, right? I don't imagine it would be that hard to do this, to find kids to do this. Because again, you're not finding a bunch of kids to do this, you're just finding one kid. And if a bunch of other guys, upper middle class guys like you, who make good money and have high IQs and good memories and stuff, and that's how they're able to make good money, if these guys do it also, then these guys, then they each have one kid. And if ever a ton of people do this, not even all, just 10 to 30% of upper middle class guys did this, we would have so many subversive coders coding the right things instead of wasting their time hacking or trying to, code a video game that's going to make them rich or whatever. And then imagine, like, I'm going to do a whole separate video about this, but like, imagine all the good effects that would come from Silk Road. Like, if these young subversive coders were all coding on Tor and making Tor utterly invincible so that it could no longer be tracked, could no longer be, surveilled or hacked into or anything by the NSA, then imagine what would happen. You know what I mean? Like just having a Silk Road, because of having an uncrackable Tor, having Tor be uncrackable would mean we could have Silk Road for real. That would not be able to be taken down. Silk Road, both times they've tried to do it's been taken down. But if we did it a third time and it was impossible to take down, then what would happen is that people would start putting hits out on Silk Road. If it was a true Silk Road, no restrictions on what you could buy or sell. You can even buy or sell heroin, you can even buy or sell murder contracts, you can even buy or sell children for sex slavery, then that is a good thing, that the Silk Road is totally, unrestricted. This is a good thing. I'm not saying like buying or selling children or heroin is a good thing. I'm just saying, like, you gotta have no restrictions, because just like the First Amendment allows people to be assholes, that it's better to let people be assholes than to have tyranny. You know what I'm saying? It's better to allow people to buy and sell children and heroin than it is to have tyranny, to have censorship, right? To have government control of, what is bought and sold. Because either you have unlimited freedom or you don't have unlimited freedom. It's really that simple. You either have, centralization and limitation and therefore tyranny, or you have, decentralization and total freedom and unlimited power and unlimited whatever in that sphere, whether it's in currency or selling like Silk Road or whatever. But imagine all the murder contracts that would be put out on ex-wives who stole the man's kids. Like he got, once every other weekend he gets to see the kids, or he doesn't get to see the kids at all, or something. Right? Like, what about that? Like guys who are put in that position and not getting able to see their kids at all, or barely getting to see their kids, they'd put a murder contract out on their ex-wife, and then the ex-wife would be killed, and then he would get custody, right? And that's fair. She stole his kids, so she deserves to die. It's really that simple. You know what I mean? Even if he cheated, she should still not get 80 or 90% or 100% custody. That's fucking ridiculous. She does deserve to die. You know what I'm saying? He should have her exsanguinated by a hitman. So, Silk Road would enable all that. It would enable true price discovery for everything, including murder. And this would, massively, massively change everything in society. People would be putting hits out on politicians, etc. That would quickly, and on family court judges. And then the law would quickly change. No family court judge would be doing anything more than 50-50 custody if his odds of getting murdered for, being a family court judge were high. And hardly anyone would want to go into being a family court judge, so there'd be a shortage of family court judges. And then maybe the whole family court judge system would collapse because they can't find people to be family court judges because no one wants to get murdered. You see what I'm saying? Like everything would radically change for the better if we had a true Silk Road that was, uncrackable, unhackable, untraceable, and that was totally unrestricted. Like you could buy or sell absolutely anything, no matter how good or evil. No matter how subversive or benign. Like, if we had a Silk Road like that, it would change the world even more than having true free speech online like the Mirror. It would change the world just as much, if not far more, than even the Mirror will change the world, even if the Mirror gets hugely popular and it becomes the new YouTube. If the MGTOW Mirror becomes the new YouTube, it still will not change the world more than a new Silk Road would change the world. I'm not trying to shit on the Mirror at all. I'm just saying that's how important the Silk Road is, like a new Silk Road that's truly unhackable, untraceable, uncrackable, and truly unlimited in what you're allowed to buy and sell. Truly decentralized to where there can be no restriction on what it does, what you buy or sell. Totally decentralized, right? Like this would be just as powerful as true free speech online. And true free speech online is incredibly powerful. It allows things to go viral. It therefore wakes up the populace to the truth, and it therefore radically changes society. Because you at least need a good chunk of the populace on your side if you're going to change things for the better. Like, 10% of the population on your side if you want a revolutionary war to happen or something and be successful, right? Because you don't have to have everybody on your side, because most people are pussies, right? So all you got to do is let all the, 70-80% of pussies sit on the sidelines, and then it's you, the 10% who are hardcore pro against the government, pro overthrowing the government, versus everybody who's on the side of government. So you at least got to have a certain percentage of people on your side that are at least not opposing you, right? And that's possible because of free speech. But again, true commerce online, being able to buy or sell anything with total anonymity and stuff, this would change the world just as much, if not more, than free speech would. And so, the blame for this not happening falls on the upper middle class guys who are making good money, $300,000 to $600,000 a year, and who are not making the world a better place by donating to, hiring young little coders to be subversive and write code for, Tor Tales or the MGTOW Mirror and things like this, right? So, this is how it is, and these guys also bear the majority of the blame for for the lack of eugenic progress of humanity as well, right? Like, as the incel problem gets worse, due to many things, but one of those things is poverty. Look at how the incel population tripled after the 2008 crash, and everybody got way more poor. That is, the price of rent went way, way up, making even the average person, the average guy, much poorer, right? This means that, as more and more men are cut out of the sex market, even just due to finances, this means that there's a greater opportunity for the top guys, the guys with really good genes who are making, let's call it $250,000 to $500,000 a year. These guys, they could easily be fucking breeding like crazy, even more than ever before in human history. These guys could be breeding like crazy, but yet they're not. They have a rare opportunity to breed like crazy and make sure the next generation is much, much smarter so that we can have way more subversive coding so that freedom can come back, so that humanity can literally survive. Because we need freedom if we're to survive. This whole government tyranny, slow technological progress thing is going to doom humanity to extinction and all other species on the planet to extinction too when all the nuclear power plants melt down because humanity not being able to keep them going, right? Because of us being extinct or because of the oil being, gone or whatever, right? So what this means is that, like, these guys bear the brunt of the blame if humanity goes extinct. These upper middle class guys, the really high IQs and really good memories, they have a huge responsibility to breed. Let them fuck like crazy. Okay, whatever. I'm not in favor of that, but whatever. If they're going to, at the very least, they should be breeding. It is utterly shameful and utterly cuckish of them. It's utterly morally shameful, but also utterly cuckish to not pass on your genes when you have that kind of power. When you have that kind of power to fuck like crazy like that, and you are not passing on your genes, that is just that is like wasting the biggest opportunity ever. It's like making hundreds of thousands of bucks a year and ending up at the end of your life dirt poor. That is fucking pathetic. You know what I mean? It's like that is like the greatest failure ever. It's like that is a way bigger and more pathetic failure than like never having made much money in your life. Because if you never made much money in your life, it's probably because you weren't able to, because you just happened to get bad genes in the genetic draw, in the crapshoot or whatever, in the roll of the dice that is life, is conception. You happen to get bad genes, so you didn't make much money. So there's nothing shameful about that, because maybe you fulfilled most of your potential, which wasn't much, but at least you fulfilled most of your potential. That's laudatory. That's to be praised, But like these top guys, a lot of them, they have every opportunity, but some of them don't ever make a lot of money, or a lot of them do make a lot of money, and they waste it. They just waste it and waste it and waste it and waste it. And so they end up poor at the end of their life. That is fucking pathetic. It's fucking pathetic to end up poor at the end of your life if you make hundreds of thousands of bucks a year. You know what I mean? And it's fucking pathetic to fuck hundreds of women over your life and not end up having, 10, 20, 30 kids. It's fucking pathetic. It's just really, really pathetic. And that is like the ultimate cuckishness in a sense, isn't it? These guys are like, I mean, you can say, oh, this is the ultimate cuckishness and this is the ultimate cuckishness. Yes, there's various forms of like, debatable ultimate cuckishness, right? But this is one of them, right? Being, going around fucking hundreds of women and having like one or two kids in your life. That is so cuckish. It's crazy. It's like, yeah, they're not literally cucking themselves in the sense of like other men, impregnating women and them having to raise them, but they are fucking women and refusing to procreate. And that's, now you may say, oh, that's like self-protection and stuff, but like, really? Like, even black guys, like, black guys who don't make that good of money or anything, like some of them have like 10, 15 kids. So like, what's the excuse of like top guys for not doing it? Plus, if the top guys were all doing it, more of the middle class guys would be having kids like crazy without caring about the financial or legal consequences of doing it. And if everybody were doing it like that, if all the top upper middle class guys were having 10, 20 kids out of wedlock and stuff, and then had a wife and had one or two kids, what are the courts going to do? Even if they award, all of his, like 50% of his income to all these women and spread it out among them, it's going to be barely anything. If he makes $300,000 a year and they split that to $150,000, but he has 15 kids, that's only $10,000 per kid, right? Per year. That's not much. That's not enough to take care of a kid. So either the women would stop being whores because of how hard it is to be a single mother and not getting enough child support from these guys, or, or like, so many, or it would be happening so much that like, women, the government would not be able to enforce it. You know what I mean? Like if all the middle class guys were also doing this, maybe they had like 5 kids out of wedlock, or they get married and then they have, a bunch of kids. They have like 2 legitimate kids. And plus, like, the courts, they're not going to be able to take an infinite amount of this guy's money. If he makes $200,000 or $300,000 a year and he has a wife and a couple of kids, what are they going to do? Impoverish his wife? Make it so that he has to sell the house and now his legitimate kids are starving? No, the courts aren't going to do that. What's the government going to do? The government couldn't stop these guys if these guys wanted to have tons of kids. Especially if the middle class guys started doing it too. If you refuse to cooperate with or bend because of a law, then a law is unenforceable. You know what I mean? So this is what men need to do. They need to breed like crazy, illegitimately, like have all men have way more kids than they can afford, and then the women won't be able to get any money out of the guy because he can't get blood from a stone. You see what I'm saying? And so what happens is, the government is forced to no longer enforce those laws. Just like in some cities in the U.S. now, they don't even arrest drug users, like heroin users, who are shooting up on the street because there's too many of them. They can't arrest them all. There's nowhere to put them. And it's just a drain on the resources of the system. So, the government stops enforcing laws that can't be enforced. So it is your duty to disobey laws that should not be laws. Tyrannical laws must be disobeyed en masse so that they are no longer enforceable. Because the government can't enforce laws that are disobeyed en masse. You are consenting by changing your behavior because of a tyrannical law. You are consenting to that law. And that is completely unacceptable. You know what I mean? In a sense, it makes sense from a certain individualistic survival perspective, but this is why you got to make a channel and open your mouth, because if everyone are saying what I'm saying here, to break unjust laws, to fuck like crazy and have a ton of kids with a ton of different women, this would be economic warfare against the government. The government would not be able to survive. The government would realize, holy shit, monogamous traditionalism is the only way to run a society and have a government. The government would backtrack completely and would be promoting monogamy, would be promoting traditionalism, would be discouraging out of wedlock pregnancy instead of incentivizing. The government would be doing that if everybody were destroying society by having tons and tons of kids out of wedlock. Because it would be undermining government power if men were doing this. You see, and plus, if the guys at the top would be the ones who'd be able to do it the most, and so it would be eugenic as well if everybody were doing this. You know what I mean? Because maybe the women see that this middle-class guy already has a couple of kids out of wedlock or whatever, and then it'd be hard for him to get a third woman pregnant out of wedlock because no woman wants to have sex with him. You see what I'm saying? But like the top guys, the women are still like, well, he still has great genes. He still makes good money, even though he does have 10, 20 illegitimate kids. I want to have a kid with him too. So at the very least, she somehow in the bottom, in her subconscious, in the bottom of her mind, she somehow realizes in her unconscious that even if she ends up being a single mother who's dirt poor by having a kid with this guy, this top guy, this guy with a 150, 160 IQ and a great memory and good charm and good energy and all that and good looks, she realizes at least my kid, if I have a son by this guy, my son will probably be good looking, charming, have a good memory, and probably have at least a 115, 120, maybe 130 IQ. And then my son could easily take care of me once he gets to be 18, 22, 25, my son will be making really good money. And then my son can be my retirement plan. Sure, it'll be hard to be a single mother, but, I can get some other guy to marry me. I only have one kid out of wedlock, and if it's a son, I've passed on my genes with this really great guy, and then I get some middle-class guy to marry me, and then I get to be taken care of in the meantime. It's way easier. I don't have to be a single mother, and I get to be taken care of in my old age by both my husband and my son, who will be making really good money because he has great genes, because he was, fathered by this, top upper middle class guy with amazing genes, top 1%, top 0.1% genes, right? So, the dysgenic state of the world or the country, and it's mainly the fault of these high IQ guys. They bear the lion's share of the blame for the tyranny, for the dysgenics, for our IQs not increasing massively. For all the negative things that come from not having enough subversive coders in society, such as not having a Silk Road, not having a true Steam or a MGTOW mirror that's impossible to take down. Like this stuff, not having a hugely popular MGTOW mirror that's as popular as YouTube, not having a Silk Road that's uncrackable, etc. That stuff is all to blame. All that blame falls on the shoulders of the guys who make $300,000 to $600,000 a year and are not coding subversive coders, to do the subversive coding, right? Really, imagine how much better society would be if we had a MGTOW mirror that was as popular as YouTube, and how easily Pizzagate could have gone viral, how easily, all fiat knowledge about fiat currency and gold and Bitcoin could go viral, knowledge of all kind of MGTOW would go viral, the MGTOWs would be as radical as they want to be instead of having to tone down their speech so they don't get kicked off of YouTube. Everything would be super radical and super truthful and super subversive, and change would be happening very, very quickly in society if we had true free speech online, which we would already have if these top guys had any benevolence at all and were coding. I mean, we're hiring 13, 14, 15-year-old coders to code for them, to code on their, to code what those top guys told them to code, like Tor or Tails or the Mirror or something. You know what I mean? Like, we would be living in a massively free society, a massively more prosperous society. Every woman would have already gotten the message. The word would have already spread that, women being in the workforce drives down male wages. Every woman would already know about that. Every woman would already know about MGTOW. There would already be a way deeper, more honest, more in-depth discussion about, all of the MGTOW-esque type of topics, the knowledge of what I talk about, and I don't think any other MGTOW man talks about, which is that, serial monogamy creates a society where 50% of men are incels, a society where the top 20% of men each have 2 fuck buddies for their whole 40-year libido career. These guys create a society where 60% of men are incels, and then the bottom 20% of women are unfuckable. So really, like, 80% of men are incels, right? Like, this knowledge would be widespread. Everybody would know that. Everybody would know about gold being good. Everybody would know about the elites being pedophiles. Everybody would know about the importance of decentralization and cryptocurrency. Everybody would know about, anarcho-capitalism and how it's totally valid and good, and statism is evil and corrupt and stupid and inefficient. Everybody would know all that stuff. Not just all men, but all women too. And we would have a massively free society as a result, because this is the kind of stuff that a lot of times even idiots can understand it. Even an 85, 90 IQ guy can understand why fiat currency is bad and sound money is good. All he has to do is have it explained to him in a simple way, and then, he can kind of understand it, and then what little he doesn't understand, he can just take on faith because of everybody around him who's smarter than him understanding it and agreeing that, yes, sound money is good, and fiat currency is bad. And so everybody around him believes it, so he believes it too. But he does have a fairly, decent understanding of why fiat currency is bad, because it allows counterfeiting. It allows the government to counterfeit and thereby steal the value of your dollars that you've saved. And he's able to understand that, and so you have a society of sound money. This is all to blame. All this blame that we don't have a society like that, that's, super wise in every way, and therefore super free. The reason we don't have anarcho-capitalism, the reason, Pizzagate didn't go viral, the reason everybody doesn't yet know about MGTOW is because of these top guys. These top guys are fucking like crazy and are not breeding. Are making $300,000 to $600,000 a year and aren't coding young subversive coders to work on Tor and Tails and the MGTOW Mirror and stuff like that. I think that's about all I had to say. I mean, what else is there to say about it other than that? I mean, this video's been way longer than I expected it to be. Hopefully people actually watch it all the way through. And I know I repeated myself somewhat, but I think for most of this video, was not repeating myself that much. And, I hope you understand my main points. Fucking like crazy and not breeding like crazy is totally cuckish. It is so feminine. It is so pathetic and hedonistic and elitist and just disgusting. There's just a couple metrics that make it a successful life. Either you fight or you fuck. And fucking means you procreate. So either you're procreating like crazy, and that's your success in life, or you're fighting like crazy, and that's your success in life. If you're doing neither of those things, you're not fighting and you're not procreating. It's like, that is a complete failure of a life. And a lot of these top, guys are failing in life. You know what I mean? These top guys who make $300,000 to $600,000 a year, they are basically complete failures in life, because despite the fact that they fucked hundreds of women, they've only had 1 or 2 kids. Or some of them don't even have any kids. And they haven't even funded any subversive fighters, and they themselves have been too lazy and hedonistic to learn to code themselves, and so they haven't done any subversive coding. They haven't hired anybody else to do any subversive coding. They haven't really spread the message online much about truth or anything. If they have a YouTube channel, it's just for their own ego gratification. They're not trying to create real strategies, telling people how to really fight the government. So really, they've done no fighting, and they've done no procreating. Little or no procreating, especially no procreating compared to how much procreating they should have done, compared to how much sex they had with how many women, right? So these guys, complete failures in life, utter failures. And what do you say about it other than that? We got to shame these guys. We got to shame them into acting better so that the world can become a better place. This has been Redshift. I hope somebody got some out of this video. Peace trucks for promiscuous men, because they are literally the cause of all gynocentrism.